Welcome to the Spirit of Business episode number 63, Comparing Yourself with Others, with Matt Murphy and Sarah McCrum.
Hi Sarah.
Hi Matt.
I'm going to talk today about something that comes up time and time again with people, and a lot of business owners especially, and it's a word. And the word is comparison. Everybody likes to compare themselves to something. Now, in business, we compare ourselves to numbers in terms of benchmarks, and sometimes we compare ourselves to our peers in our industry or our competitors, or we compare ourselves to people and say, you know, somebody's doing better than us or worse than us, and it just happens time and time again. And I think there's times where it's healthy, and I think there's times where it's unhealthy. And I'd really like to talk about that as a topic today, because I want to address the unhealthiness associated with it to then determine, is there a better way to think about comparison?
And I think the most unhealthy version of all of it is when we compare ourselves to some mythical person who doesn't even exist. There's a kind of, I should be like this, I should have achieved that. And if you look at it, there's no actual reason why you should, but there's a sort of mental comparison going on that has no real foundation and can actually become almost a kind of subtle torture, I would say.
It's interesting you talk about that, because the mythical in their mind is actually reality a lot of the time, because they will view certain people in a way that's probably not true. And I see this time and time again, especially I'm in a very privileged position, as you are, that I get to see inside people's lives. I get to see inside of businesses and business owners and families and that sort of type thing. And I take that with a huge amount of respect and responsibility, where that sort of level is never betrayed, because it's such an intimate relationship, and I would never breach that. So it's really interesting for me a lot of the time where I might have a view or an image of a person about their business or about them if they're known, and then when you start to get to know them, you realize that's probably not the image that they may portray in the marketplace. And so time and time again, where people say, I'm not as good as, or my business is not as like this one or that one or this person, and I feel like I haven't achieved and all that sort of stuff, they actually are comparing themselves with a mythical figure, because the reality of what they think is not the reality, the true reality. And so I think this comparison to the mythical is a very valid part of this conversation.
And I notice you probably see this a lot with people who are perhaps consultants and advisors and those kinds of people. I don't know about other businesses, but I see a lot with them that it can look as though there's this incredible exterior. They're often people who are very personable, have a certain kind of presence and ability to be in the public. And if you start to look behind the scenes inside the business, sometimes people who've had this tremendous kind of persona of success, actually inside they're not really doing necessarily very much, which isn't a criticism of them, but it's surprising that when you actually look at the numbers, for example, or you look at what's really going on. I've noticed myself, I saw how often I get a false impression of people. And the more information I have, the more clearly I can see the reality. I find it very leveling in a way, which I appreciate. It helps me to realize that we're all much more human than we may sometimes think that we are. And even people who are perhaps financially way more successful, when you see inside their lives, they're just human beings like us. They have the same kind of issues as we all have. Somebody can be very successful in one area, but in another area they have many more challenges. And it helps, I think, to make us see each other, respect each other more for who we are, rather than some kind of fake pictures of who we think other people are.
And you would notice this as an advisor and a coach and a mentor, is that some people would put you up in a pedestal of sort of that you would demonstrate success in a particular way, or knowledge or experience or wisdom, and people would then put you up on that particular pedestal. And I know from many conversations, you don't like to be put up on a pedestal because it's just not the place to be. And I'm the same, because you're exactly right that we're still human beings at the end of the day, and we're not perfect at everything, and we're fallible in certain aspects of it. So therefore, yes, we happen to be really good at a particular thing, okay, and living a life a particular way that may be viewed as being successful in some regard. But I think that's where the negative comparison comes, and say I'm not as good as that, therefore there's a negative connotation associated with it. And I think that's where it becomes very unhealthy.
It's so interesting, even as I'm listening to you, because there are two things that are playing out at the same time. One is that I laugh sometimes at the things that people think about me, because exactly what you're saying, they think that because I'm very good at this, I must have this or I must have that. So they attribute things to me that aren't true at all. And usually, if I find that, I laugh and I can kind of break through that a bit. But there was this tiny voice, it's very, very quiet as you were speaking, that's saying, well, Matt's way more successful than me, which kind of equals Matt makes much more money than I do, runs a much more successful business than I do, which is a stupid thing to say, because it doesn't even ask any questions of what the criteria for success are. There are all kinds of assumptions behind that are completely false, but I can hear the voice, and it's really quiet these days, but it's still there. And it used to be really loud for me, that anyone who was successful in business, I think I did put on a pedestal. But so it's funny for me listening to that, because there's still a little bit of that self-judgment there, like I should be, but I can't even answer the question where I should be. So it's again that fake thing. It's like I should be somewhere else, but I don't even know where it is that I would want to be. So it's meaningless.
So where does that come from?
Wow, I don't know. I mean,
Is it
some of it,
wiring? Is it from a kid you've been told that this is what success looks like
not
in
for
your
me,
mind?
because for me, your kind of success, we used to shoot people like you. We used to pretend
What?
fake shoot people from the car. Like, yeah, it was in British kind of this, that where I grew up was very, very kind of unattractive to be successful in business.
Right.
Not in an old family business, but just like making it yourself was really not appreciated at all. So it didn't come from my childhood, definitely. I think, I don't know. I think a lot of it comes from the marketing, the kind of media world that we've lived in probably for the last 20 or 30 years, where we're constantly being pumped with messages about, 10x your business in 6 months, and you could make 1 million in 30 days, and all those kinds of things. And I think those kind of pry their way into our brains and just make us feel insecure about whatever we're doing. Like, whatever it is, it's not enough. And then that kind of compounds with the general feeling as a human being that it's very easy to tap into, that it's not enough, I'm not enough. There's a sort of underlying thread that we can all drop into of not enough. And so they kind of match each other. The marketing people really know how to play on the not enough feeling that human beings have. And I think that's why it's not real, because it's actually coming from messages that have been created to make you feel insecure, not really created to benefit you.
And as you say, it's only a part of the message. It's only part of the reality, because um, you know there's multifacets to make up a successful life. As you say, um, money is one aspect of it, but health is another aspect of it, and you know mental health is another aspect of it. So physical and mental health is another aspect to it. There's all these things, and relationships and family and friends and the rich tapestry of your life. Yet we're still judging on one aspect potentially, which is I'm not as successful because I don't run as big a business, or I don't have as much money, or as da 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 da. And you go, and then and then the people that have actually got all that go, well, yeah, but I'm not as happy as that person that's sitting on the beach doing nothing. Sort of type principle. So, everybody's comparing themselves to something else that they don't actually have.
So that's really interesting because I think that helps to give us a little bit of a clue to this. I never noticed this before, but it gets really weird and unhealthy when you take one tiny bit of somebody else's life and you make that a measure of success and then try to apply that to yourself. So if I look at, let's say, the turnover of your business and I compare it to the turnover of my business, I can just say you're way more successful than I am. That's true. But it's just one part of the whole tapestry, as you said. And so to equate that with success is a kind of nonsense. For me to look and say, I might say, wow, Matt's much more successful in his business, meaning he makes much more money, his business is more profitable. And then I might say, I'd like that. Or I might say, I don't want that, that's a headache. I can make a decision of whether I want that. And I think that's where comparisons are useful. You can look at something and say, do I want that? Is that a direction I want to go in? Or do I not want that? And from that, I can say, yes, I would like my business to be more successful. And I could say, definitely, I don't want the headache part of it. It helps me to refine and define how it is that I want to live and how it is that I want to define success, which might be different for you, or we might be more aligned than that anyway.
And this concept then is that, you want it all. Okay. So people say, I want it all. Okay. Well, what does all mean? And, is having it all really, possible, but also, is there compromise involved, or can you actually have exactly what you want? And it's going to be different for different people because people are going to make decisions about saying, I don't really want to manage 100 people, for example, like we've got in our business. They see that as being 100 headaches, sort of type principle. I've heard that analogy before. Now, that's not my world. Like I'm okay with that, and I enjoy the challenge and the benefits that I get from running a business of that particular size. But this concept of choice, I think, is really, really good thing to explore. And the other thing I want to explore is this concept of normalizing things. I spend a lot of my time in business with business owners normalizing their situation because they actually will have a skewed view of the world. And I'll go, well, hang on a minute, that's not necessarily right. And this is what most people that your experience will go through that particular process. So what I'm doing there is bringing it from this false that you spoke about before to what the reality is of most situations. And that just comes from just experience of working with thousands of businesses over the years. So those two concepts I think are worth exploring further.
Yes, that feeling that what's going on inside my mind is unique and special and quite dramatic when it's actually totally normal and almost everybody experiences it at some time and it's really nothing to be excited about or worked up about. That I see that at the life, people dealing with their lives. And so as human beings, it's really interesting what goes on inside our minds and how big that can appear to be when it's actually often something that's very, very insignificant in the scheme of things.
And comparison is the hardest some of that too, I think, because you're starting to say, and in this concept that you said at the start, where you said, I should be, a lot of these guilt words come in, or I want, I should be, I'm not where I'm meant to be. All those sorts of things start to come into play as well, that then feed this whole insecurity.
Yes, I think the should part that's the dangerous part of it. So sometimes people come to me and they say, oh, I'm really envious of that person, or I really want what that person's got. And there's a bitterness in there, and there's a resentment, and there's a lot of self-judgment and self-criticism. And I always try to get them back to just being honest. If that's something you want, just admit it. There's nothing wrong with wanting something that somebody else has. They're just an example that can show you, oh, I'd like more of that. That's a really powerful thing. That's really healthy. That other version is really unhealthy and really difficult. So it's when it becomes a I should have this, but I don't. It's like that's an impossible thing to say. I should be something that I'm not, or I should have something, but I don't. It's like if you don't have it, it doesn't matter how many times you say you should, you don't have it. There's such a dissonance in there. So to be able to say, I don't have this now, but I would like it in the future, there's no dissonance there. That's perfectly doable. And then it's up to you to see if you can do it. But to say, I don't have it now and I should have it, is just making yourself wrong for no benefit whatsoever. It's like your parents saying you're a bad person when you've actually just done something stupid or you've done something bad. You're not a bad person. You've just done something that you shouldn't have done. So we need to make these distinctions and realize that saying I should be somewhere where I'm not is impossible. Like it just screws your mind, basically.
And what I've just picked up then is something that we talk a lot about too, even in terms of us and our relationship in business and that sort of type thing, is the language that we use and the words that we use. And using the words like should is a word that really, you need to really remove it out of the vocabulary a lot of the time. And I think that catching ourselves on these words, and that's something that you've taught me more and more to do, is to really think about the words that I'm saying, because the words will feed subconsciously the thought.
Words have energy. Words themselves are not terribly important, but that the energy they package up is a very creative energy. And if you are, through your words, creating something you don't want to experience, that's not something to continue. So I think that's what we need to realize always, that the words, they package the energy, they package this kind of vibrational frequency that is a creative frequency. And therefore, if you say something that you don't really mean, you're still saying it and that energy is still in it. So you're actually creating what you don't really mean to create. And that's why I tend to be a bit pernickety about it, because I can often feel people saying things that they don't mean. It's like, that's not what you really want. I know you well enough to know that that's not what you're looking for in your life. Please, let's not keep saying it, because I don't want to watch you creating what you don't want to experience.
And on that experience thing too, the other word that you said before was the bitterness, which is the jealousy. And I think that also puts you into this negative mindset of comparison, because there's a jealousy that goes along with that comparison. And, whereas I think that if you're celebrating somebody else's achievements and you say, that's awesome that they've been able to achieve that, and I'd like to achieve that as well, is such a far more better way of dealing with it. And it's funny, even today, I had a very small example today of a client saying, "Oh, you're not going to be happy with this, but we're actually going to be going on a holiday, and we're going to spend 6 months in a different destination. We're going to do some work up there, and and I was saying that as if I'd be upset about it because I wasn't there, or that I wasn't experiencing the same thing that they're experiencing. I said, I'm really pleased that you're actually going to change your business life where you can go and work from a different location for a 6-month period of time, and celebrate the fact that you've got your business into a stage where you can do that. And so you should, because you've worked really hard over your life. So for me, I celebrate that. I'm not jealous in any form about that. Such a small example, but people are thinking they're playing small because they're worried about saying something that might create a jealousy in someone else. And it's just such a small example, but it plays out in a very bigger example when we're comparing businesses.
And actually, in a way, it's quite a big example, because for somebody to be able to go away for 6 months and run their business from a different location, maybe a really beautiful, enjoyable location, that's for many people a dream. And I think it's really important to draw attention to the energy, the way you described it, when you just are really happy that they're able to do that. That's such a clean response. And the interesting thing about jealousy is it not only has that envy in it, like, oh, I wish I could have what you have, but it has a possessiveness in it as well. It's like, I don't want you to enjoy that. So we try to destroy the other person's experience simply because we're not able to have it. And that's what I think jealousy particularly is so destructive, because if we can take out that kind of should and that the bitterness and resentment and just say, I would love that, or how great that is for you. I'm so happy to hear that. If it's something I would like myself, like if oh my goodness, I would really love to be able to do that too, then let's just say that I'd love to be able to do that too. Clean. And then there's no jealousy, there's no envy, there's no possessiveness, there's no bitterness or attempt to destroy somebody else's fun. There's just a clean, honest wish or desire, which you can then start to pay attention to and do something about.
And we have to teach this to our children, because I just had another experience, another one today, funnily enough, where a business owner was saying that um, one of his children came home, and the kids were all saying, your dad, makes too much money, and he's, like it was a whole money conversation around this particular person. And this is not the experience with this person, by the way. He's, not at all. But the parents obviously have been talking to the children because of the experience they've had. And I look at that and go, oh my goodness, the kids aren't saying this. The parents are saying to the kids, and then the kids are actually saying it to the daughter of this particular person. And they're teaching it, and it's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy around this particular comparison thing. So our kids are being taught the comparison thing too.
And the irony of it is that all of those people, the people who are envious, the people who are jealous, the people who have the shoulds, are like all of us. You talked a little bit earlier about having it all. One of the things that I've noticed is that at every generation now, there is a real desire to have it all. And what I think that means is we want to have money. We don't want to be poor. We want to have really good relationships and love and happy families. We want to be healthy. We now want to live in a really clean, beautiful environment, and we want to have healthy communities, and we want to have, a healthy economy, all of these things. And you can ask an 18-year-old or a 70-year-old, and their language will not be much different. And I think that's completely natural to want to have it all. And I certainly grew up in a generation, and I think many older people did, where you were told you can't have it all. And we have seen, and you will have seen, many people sacrifice family, for example, for the sake of financial success, or sacrifice their health for the sake of the business. But I think there's a genuine desire now not to do that so much. There's been a real change. And I feel that it's very important there for us to start to look at what is all for me, because my all is going to be different from your all, and every single person's all is going to be unique to them. And so it actually raises the bar in terms of how do we visualize or sense into the life that we really want to live. What is it that we're in the process of creating? Because the old answers don't really work. So it doesn't work to say, well, I have to be successful, I have to make as much money as I possibly can. It doesn't matter what I do with my health. It doesn't matter if I have a heart attack by the time I'm 50, as long as my family's okay and I've proven myself. It's not okay anymore. So if that's not okay, we can't make those blind assumptions that as long as I keep my head down, or as long as I do this, everything will be fine. It won't. And so that requires us to ask much more demanding questions of ourselves, I think, and to spend time on looking at what is it that I want to experience in terms of the business? What kind of family life is really important for me? And how can I have business and family? And then what kind of health do I want? How can I have business and family and health? And now what kind of environment do I want to live in? How can I contribute to the environment being better as well, or my community being better, which sounds incredibly demanding. And perhaps it is in a way, but I guess if we're wanting it, we're capable of doing it.
The thing that you reminded me of then when you were talking is that I know plenty of people that have probably achieved every single one of those aspects, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're happy, right? And I can see this desire to get more. So it's like the bar keeps shifting up and up and up.
So they
Now,
should have more, yeah? They should be somewhere
yeah,
else.
there's something there, and I'm thinking like, in somebody else's view, they've got sufficient in every aspect of it, but for them, they're still trying to want more or thrive for more. And it's really interesting that whole concept of, um, I think the secret is, when is enough enough? Maybe.
Or maybe it's not that, it's about maybe it's genuine to want more. Like more love, of course we want more love. Whatever we've experienced, maybe with our family or whoever. But I think that's quite natural to want to expand that. And I notice that we have opportunities from time to time, which usually come from contraction and tension. We have an opportunity to expand our capacity for love. And it may well be that if we're in business, we need to create more. It's really difficult to just be static and it doesn't feel right to shrink. But can we do that and be happy? And being
Mm.
happy is on a different scale. It's not like, well, happy will come when I've got that. Happy is now. So if you can be growing your business and be happy while you're doing it, that's really different from growing your business so you can be happy one day in the future.
And I see that a lot with business owners and sacrificing today for tomorrow.
Yeah, it feels like we often come to this point in different ways. My experience with teaching so many people is that just doesn't work. You can fight, you can discuss it with me, you can argue, you can say whatever you want, and it doesn't matter how many people have argued with me about it. Like, no, I just need to get this done, and then they're no happier than they were. They haven't had any more practice of being happy. They haven't had any more experience of it. They've actually just been practicing self-sacrifice and what's the word? Delayed gratification, which is actually usually a moment of gratification and then back to the same old pattern. So my conclusion is it just doesn't work. That genuinely, if you want to experience happiness, be happy now. If you want to have a happy relationship, be happy now. If you want to have a happy business, be happy now. It's just like really simple, rather stupid stuff that works. And you can say, well, how can I be happy? I'm not making much money. It's like, well, first of all, if you're making a whole lot more money, I'm not sure you'll be any happier because then you'll say, oh, I've got so much responsibility. I've got so many decisions to make, and you'll have plenty to keep you unhappy. But also, just because you're not making much money, does that mean you can't be happy? Not really.
And that comes back to then this comparison thing and about, what is the levels that you feel comfortable with. And financially, if I bring it back to the levels on financially, you only need a certain amount of money. Okay. I think, and I see this with different levels of people, but there's generally a level that people get to. We go, that's enough. Anything over that becomes reasonably excessive. And it was interesting. I was reading an article today on a topical subject about Melinda and Bill Gates and about the fact that they've allocated $10 million to each child and the rest is going to charity. $120 billion of it going to charity and $10 million of it going to each child. I thought, wow, there's a very large difference between the amount that's going to charity and the amount that's going to each individual child. And clearly, they've made a decision about saying that's sufficient, okay? And you could argue what that number actually is at the end of the day, but I do see that there is thresholds of things, and people are probably trying to get to that threshold. I think the unhealthiness is when people are pushing beyond that threshold when other factors are at play, where there's greed, jealousy, or negative connotations about saying, well, it's because somebody else has got that, so therefore I want to strive for it more, as opposed to, no, actually, I'm happy with this level because it allows me to have better relationships or better health or better well-being. So I think we have to be very conscious, and I see this a lot, and I try to teach this a lot, is to say, well, define what that level is, which hopefully will define a richer, fuller, happier life by getting to that particular point and not pushing, not just keep moving the bar above and above and above.
Well, and I think if you do want to move the bar above, there has to be a purpose to it. So it has to be something that fulfills something for you, that might be beyond business. That's what one of the things I see a lot is people who have all the money that they need for their life, but they're making more than that anyway, and they know that, and they're saying, I don't want it or I don't need it, but they're making it, and that's clearly going to continue. But most of them have never ever thought about what they could do with that money. And it's really funny because lots of the people I meet, they're like really want to do something purposeful with their life, and yet they haven't thought about applying that to the excess money that they have. So I'll find people who've retrained as a life coach, for example, because they're really called to a more purposeful existence. And yet with the extra money they have, they've never thought about, well, how could I use some of that to perhaps invest in things that I really care about? Or how could I invest in businesses that I really care about so that they can do something and I can feel connected with it? It's like people set that threshold and then just leave it. As long as I've got enough for my retirement, that'll be okay. And then they get bored because they haven't realized that they need to go beyond.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start to unpack the word comparison, where we got to in terms of this conversation. But I think it's at the root of a lot of, as I said, good, because it can be a motivator, but there's got some bad associated with it, or for want of a better word, in terms of the negative connotation where it becomes, around jealousy or things that aren't serving us well by being like that, or pushing us beyond where we naturally should be. So something else in our life isn't fulfilled and is broken. Like if you're pushing for too much money, sort of type thing, but it's at the sacrifice of relationships and family and health and well-being. And I think that this is a really interesting note to say with comparison, about full comparison, as opposed to, as you said before, a particular comparison to a particular thing. And I think that's really important as probably a message for me, to continually tell people it's only one element of their life.
Yes, and I think that driving comparison that pushes you to do more and more is really that you're looking at other people because you don't want to look at yourself. You don't want to look at the hole that's gaping inside you. So you look at what other people have done and think, well, if I do that, maybe I'll fill the hole, which you won't, because it doesn't really work like that. And so it becomes a way of escaping from yourself. And actually, the only way you can turn that around is to face yourself. Face the hole that you can feel inside yourself. And actually, it's not so difficult to fill in that hole if you realize that you're not going to fill it in by having more and more and more and more stuff. There's nothing wrong with having more stuff, but it needs to have a purpose to it. It's just not what's going to fill the hole.
Yeah, because we're not advocating that, the concept that money doesn't make you happy. Well, we're not suggesting that, don't be motivated to actually achieve the things you want to achieve, but probably just put them into balance.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know, I think money and happiness go really well together, actually, but they go well together when they go together. It's not one first and then the other. Let's put them together, and then we have a really good combination. And then there's no need, there's no need to do that kind of envy and jealousy thing. You can just be very honest with yourself, see what it is that you want, see what it is that you don't want, live your own life rather than somebody else's life. To me, that's a path of fulfillment.
You've got a wonderful way of bringing together the conversation that we have into a final statement. You seem to do it really well every podcast. And once again, I think you've done a great job of bringing it together into a kind of a final thought to take away from. So not sure if there's anything else that I can add to that, other than I think that was a really great way to bring together this concept of the word comparison.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been an interesting one.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for listening to The Spirit of Business with Matt Murphy and Sarah McCrum. We'll be back next week with another episode. You'll find the show notes with links and other useful information on our website, spiritofbusiness.live. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends.